with the we are live. Thank you.
Oh, okay, blue light. Got your blue light? Okay.
Mr. Chair and Miss Chair, we are live.
Okay, that was Mark giving us the signal that we are live. So Chair Lara, it's your meeting.
Today is September 12th and the time is 5:11 p.m. I'm calling to order the Baldwin Park Stakeholders Oversight Committee regular meeting. Pastor Jackson, can you lead us in an invocation, please?
Heavenly Father, we just come before you right now in the name of the Lord Jesus. We thank you and we praise you. We thank you, Lord God, for this meeting, the stockholders that are here, and we'll eventually know what to do because you will lead, guide, and direct us in the way that we should go. But in the meantime, Lord, I also want to lift up 9/11 that took place, that we just celebrating and commemoration of 9/11, that will never, ever happen in this nation again. So lead, guide, and direct us in the way that we should go. In the name of the Lord, we pray. Amen.
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 Now, if we can please stand, face the flag, and put our right hand over our heart. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Mr. Sines, can I please have a roll call
Absolutely. Chair Lara,
here?
Vice Chair Jackson,
Here.
Member Hernandez,
Here.
Member Mata Caracamo,
Here.
Member Orozco,
Here.
Member Rodriguez,
Here.
Member Van Wyn.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. At this moment, we will open public communications. Mr. Sines, anyone looking to speak?
Chair Lara, at this time, we have not received a request for comments or input.
Thank you. Anyone else looking to speak that did not fill out a speaker card? Now is your time. Seeing no one else is looking to speak, we move to close public communications. And now we will move on to new business. Item number 1, Measure BP investment opportunity categories, formulation and prioritization. That was a mouthful.
Yeah. No. Thank you, Chair Lara, members of the SOC. From our first meeting, your first meeting last month, we talked about how to best organize the business of the SOC, which is to come up with a way of selecting and vetting project proposals based on your recommendations that could then be forwarded to the city council. And so we have devised a categorization system that also has a prioritization associated with it that we believe will facilitate the placement of proposals under categories that can depict a general theme, a general common theme of interest that can then be utilized in the vetting process as you consider the pros and the cons and the merits of those proposals. So what we have presented to you is 10 categories in effect that depict areas that we believe encapsulate and capture categories of priority and interest in terms of the business of the city. And what we also propose is that we do the prioritization on the basis of subcategories as opposed to the general categories. And the rationale behind that is that rather than having one single category become the one single selected general area that the committee would only focus on, for example, and it's only an example, not because, we anticipated this could happen, but let's just say the committee felt that we should prioritize public safety as a single area, as a top priority. Well, then that ends up being that public safety will take up all of the investment opportunities in the first round, second round, third round, depending on how you decided to advance them to the city council. So we felt that at the category level that we should not prioritize. Instead, if we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so we are recommending a nomenclature for organizing the proposals in the common theme, like I said earlier. And then in further refining the more specific topics, you will then populate the categories utilizing the subcategories that can then be associated with specific proposals. And upon developing a more refined framework, as you had indicated in your first meeting, you would then go on a roadshow, if you will, where you would present those categories and subcategories to the community in the way of community meetings, soliciting their input and their ideas. So if we go to the next slide as well, please. These are the 10 major categories that we're recommending and proposing to be utilized in grouping the subcategories that will then be utilized to populate specific projects. And I will go over them. It's 10 of them. We used a letter system so that we wouldn't be somehow subconsciously utilizing a numerical order that you would then think that we're depicting as a priority. So we wanted this to be very generic at this juncture in the way of prioritizing any categories. So city and community empowerment. And then we'll go onto a slide that will show the examples of the subcategories that we believe would fall under each of the categories. And then, of course, any others that you would, in your discussion, also include after today. So community empowerment, city workforce development, that applies specifically to city employees, meaning those of us who work for the city and the as a city workforce development. Economic development, that applies to the business community in the city in the way that it grows the tax base and it provides obviously opportunities for residents to do their shopping right here in the city or services that they require. And there's public safety, of course, public safety. Recreation and parks, anything that would fall under recreation and parks, which is an entire universe of facilities and services. Our senior community and programs that are associated with our senior community. Sports development as a general category, anything that relates to the activities of sports would fall under that. We felt that we should call the number H, or I should say letter H, street infrastructure, as an easier way of associating with the kinds of project that would fall under that. You'll see in the subcategories that applies to anything related to streets, whether it's pavement and others as well. Youth development, which of course is the future of the city in the next generation, and the investment, having it be as an investment category, we felt was important, and see if the SOC agrees with it. And then the ever catch-all miscellaneous for things that do not necessarily fit into any one of the other categories would then go into the miscellaneous category. We go to the next slide, and then you will see an example of subcategories. These are not yet specific projects. These are subcategories as examples of things that will fall under each of the 10 main categories. So under community empowerment, anything that is proposed as an improvement at the neighborhood basis. So a group of residents that are part of a neighborhood group, if you will, a neighborhood association who feel that a certain improvement, it could be a streetscape improvement, it could be a tree planting undertaking, it could be as is common in other places where there's adopt a project, a community group coming together and say, we want to adopt this median, or we want to adopt this common area and keep it clean and ensuring that it, so that could be at the community level. And then proposals in which neighborhood associations or neighborhood groups want to encourage community participation, and they give you a proposal to say, can you fund us for hosting a community reception, for example. Those are generally small in nature and in scope, but we felt that keeping them under their own category was important. And then we put in here housing support. Housing support can come in many different levels, not necessarily rental subsidy or rental vouchers, but since it applies to the community in general, we thought we would put it under community empowerment. And then category B, workforce development. That's for your city staff, the folks, all of us who work in the city. And of course, recruiting and retaining staff is of import for the city as a whole. Clearly that having a stable workforce, a motivated workforce, and a dedicated workforce is to the benefit of the city residents. So we thought that should have a category in itself. Oftentimes, being able to have staff develop specific skills on something that is new and growing, not just in technology, but generally in and around technology becomes very important. And as an example, something related to cybersecurity, something related to artificial intelligence, which is just growing by leaps and bounds right now, and us trying to catch up to it. We need to have staff who would be willing to take on those specific specialized kind of training, which costs money. And then being competitive with our neighboring cities. We are always proud of being an employer of choice. And I know you would want city staff to be very, I believe, happy and proud to work in Baldwin Park, and the pride is mutual. But it's always one of those where the city of Irwindale attracts somebody from our own city of West Covina, city of Covina, El Monte, you name it. There's a competitive nature to that. We know that. So retaining and recruiting staff, we feel, is very important. Economic development in terms of, we're a good sized city at 75,000 residents, just under 8 square miles. Compared to other cities, we're of a good size, and we have the ability to certainly retain businesses, but also attract new businesses. But, are we responding to the needs and wants of the residents? Do we have the kinds of businesses that they would like to see here? Are we complementary of the kinds of businesses that are part and parcel of living in a city? Some folks have mentioned whether we have restaurants that are sort of like a neighborhood bar and grill as an example is, can we have a BJ's in Baldwin Park? And, I know that a lot of times has to do with the taste and choice of residents and sometimes the age group, but no, the answer is we don't have a BJ's. But should we have a BJ's, and what would it take to attract a BJ's? And are we competitive in attracting the IT technology companies to Baldwin Park? And there's a pretty exciting company that is just about to start business here in Baldwin Park that is in the solar panel making business. Very high tech. And, they chose Baldwin Park as a place to open their business. It's more of a manufacturing business. And I know this firsthand. It's been difficult for them to get up and running. And there's all kinds of things that go into opening up a business of that kind. And we have not lent them any help at all. Not that I'm not saying we should, but we definitely are facilitating them getting all their permits and ensuring that we help them out in that regard. But, what would it take to attract another kind of business, a software development business, or anyway, that's the economic development aspect of it, because with it comes the creation of jobs, which is of interest to our residents. And category D would be public safety. Anything and everything that's related to public safety, obviously patrol officers, equipment. The chief just arrived, and he's been wanting to get two-way radios as an example. I think he has a proposal ready to go as soon as we allow him to submit a proposal. But there's clearly a need for everything related to public safety, and those would be dollars well invested. Recreation and parks, again, these are not in any particular order at this point. I don't want anyone to think that we're prioritizing any one category over the other. But recreation and parks, as we have gone through the street markets and the concerts in the park, we have seen what Rec and Parks is capable of doing, and how much more they could do if they were given the additional resources. So plenty of opportunities there as well. And then our senior community, with regards to are we addressing enough of their needs that could conceivably be addressed by the city? We felt that warranted a category unto itself. Sports development, I believe that this is a category that applies to everybody, irrespective of whether we're involved in sports or not, because either I've gone through the entire progression of playing sports when I was a kid, playing sports when I was in high school, playing adult sports as an adult, as a younger adult, and now enjoy watching sports. But either way, I think no matter the age, sports is something that applies to everybody, and having a deliberate way of promoting it, I think, is important, and it's an investment opportunity for sure for Measure BP. Street infrastructure, anything that relates to what goes on in our streets, whether it's paving, signalization. There are many areas where folks think, well, is a stop sign adequate enough, or is it time to have a signal at those intersections? Some of you may have known that we did experiment with a glorieta, a roundabout. But those are the kinds of things that apply to traffic and street infrastructure, but it's also an example of things that can be tried, that are part of our street infrastructure. Streetscapes, you've seen the downtown revitalization streetscape and how beautiful Ramona Boulevard looks. And part of Main Avenue as well. Sidewalks, sidewalks are near and dear to every resident, right? Either because you live in front of one or you walk on one, or somehow you walk your dog on a sidewalk. And sidewalks or sidewalks that are in disrepair clearly become even a safety priority. I put in parking structures because you would know firsthand that many pockets in the city are parking deficient, and that in itself creates quite a bit of tension among residents. People fighting for a parking spot. The interface between multifamily areas and single family can create quite a bit of tension just on parking availability. Are we at the point where contemplating parking structures of some kind or common parking is a possibility? We put that in there because it does address a need, but it may not necessarily be in the form of a parking structure, but it's important that we recognize that is a need. And then localized drainage. We're fortunate in the sense that the contour of our terrain in Baldwin Park is generally sloping, so we have very few flat areas. I think Ramona has some of those localized drainage areas, but I'm talking even more localized than just like an intersection. In some locations, either because of the root system of a tree that has created upwelling or swelling of the street surface or the sidewalk, it creates a ponding effect, and water, which sometimes can be irrigation water, does not drain, and it ponds up, and that can create a slippery problem, or in the time of the mosquito season, like right now, it can create a public health hazard. So these are very small, generally small projects, but they're nonetheless very high priority to the neighborhood. So that would fall under street infrastructure. Youth development, we mentioned to you at the last meeting how we had just finished our summer employment program and how meaningful it is for the high school seniors and juniors, for many of them, their first job, the inspiration that comes with it, not to mention their ability to learn to earn money and make money through their efforts. Incredibly impactful and very profound on the larger effect that has. We feel that the SOC, considering it as a category for investment, definitely is warranted. And then under miscellaneous, we see how rapidly the conversion to electrification of cars is happening. If we were to take a poll here among all of us, I would guarantee at least one person has an electric car. And it's not just MO. Do you have an electric car? See, I figured you did. But it's just growing so rapidly, right? So do we have the right infrastructure to support that growth? So that could be a consideration for you, because it's in the assessment of many, it's not growing fast enough, and so folks do struggle to find a place to charge the car, and can be a deterrent for people buying an electric car. We included in this miscellaneous category city facilities, much like city workforce. The city facilities from which we operate whether it's the city yard, whether it's city hall, the council chambers, the police department, the facilities within the recreation parks, if you will. Those are very important, and they're also a pride and joy of city residents. And when folks come to the Arc, as an example, and the beauty of the facility is, it's important. So investing on having state-of-the-art facilities, or at least in adequate facilities, is something that we feel the SOC should consider. And we included this here, an event center for the SOC to sort of brainstorm on it. This is along the lines of, we had talked about generating economic activity and economic development, where folks would want to, say, come to our restaurants or would want to come to our hotels. We have at least one hotel. But how do we support that sort of economic activity? And you have surrounding cities such as, say, Pico Rivera, which has the Pico Rivera Sports Arena. It's an event center. And, I think the sports arena, the Pico Rivera Sports Arena has a capacity of 8,000 folks. It's large enough to host a concert event, but small enough that it doesn't take over the entire city when it happens. So something along those lines that can be either complementary to a park, or it can be a standalone facility. But we wanted to throw it in here as food for thought for the SOC. As the location of our city being at the hub of the valley and central to so many places that can easily access our location without having to drive 2 hours, gives us sort of an enviable location. So an event center may be something that you could consider. So those are the categories and subcategories that we present to you for your discussion, and to be able to consider whether this is in line what you think we ought to continue to pursue, and then populate it with any others that you want to come up with. And then this could easily be a 2-meeting kind of discussion. We shouldn't pretend to want to complete this discussion today. I mean, it should be given at least 2 meetings. This meeting and 1 more meeting, if not 3 meetings. But I turn it back over to you, Chair Lara.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
Okay. So Enrique, and I know I'm not here to give any, but I just wanted to ask a couple of questions, Enrique, in regards to the recommendations that you have on the categories and the subcategories. How did you guys come up with these categories?
How did we come up with them?
Yeah, how did you guys?
Yeah, it's generally, I had given it a lot of thought. I bounced it around the E team and my staff. So at this point, it has been just our staff development, just us.
And it's a great variety of categories, but I'm just looking at some of the things that were listed on here, and just thinking back about the community meetings that we had last year in the summer before this was passed by the voters. And so I know that there's going to be a couple of here that, obviously it's up to the SOC members to, prioritize which ones they want to send to the council or not. But one of the ones that's sticking out to me right away is the city workforce development. And that was absolutely one that the residents did speak up against. So I don't know if that, that's something that you want to maybe revisit, even though I know it's important for us to continue getting things done here. I don't know if we want to use Measure BP funds for that, only because this was something that the community was very adamant about and was something that they basically said, this is what you want to use this money for. So in my opinion, I think it would be going back on our word and what we said we were going to use Measure BP for. I know public safety was a big priority for the community at the community meetings, but I'm kind of disappointed to see that park police or park rangers or some type of enforcement in our public facilities, especially our parks, is not on here, because that was one of the biggest priorities that the community had. We need to make sure that we are, either through the SOC or the city council, obviously, but I would like to see, that as an option here as well, because I know that was one of the big top priorities that they had. And then when it comes to community development, and one of the questions you asked was, what would it take to attract the BJs? So my question would be, how would we accomplish that through Measure BP or using Measure BP funds? And why isn't community development doing that now? Why would it have to be through Measure BP to try to attract these businesses? So, and the reason why I point these out is because obviously you have a big general. You're giving the SOC committee a lot of options, which is great, but I know that they weren't, or most of them weren't involved or there at the community meetings, which is why I feel it's very important that we still have those community meetings with the committee so that they can hear themselves from the community what it was that they wanted this to be used for and prioritized. So those were just some of my concerns. I mean, great things on here, a lot of great things for the community, but one thing that I don't want to lose sidetrack of is that we need to make sure we're prioritizing things that are going to benefit the residents of Baldwin Park, the community, business community. Obviously, we need it. It'll help us increase the Measure BP funds, but we still need to make sure that we're prioritizing projects or programs that the community really wants to see get done in Baldwin Park. And I think the category B, I think that one was one that they really spoke out against. I don't really see any other ones that they spoke out against, but that one. And so just wanted to just kind of give back, give you guys a little brief history of what we dealt with the community, what, they wanted to hear, what they didn't want. I know some of you were there, Jorge, Mr. Orozco. I know you guys were part of some of those committee meetings, but other than that, I think that's all that I had, but just also maybe include that park police or some type of park security for our parks within the public safety category. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I have a question here. Is boundary lines for SOC with all of the categories that are here, our duties as oversight, where are the boundary lines, what is allowed and what is not allowed? You know what I mean?
Right. As a general rule, and we have our attorney here, there is no gifting of public funds. So that's probably the only rule that applies. There's no gifting of public funds. But outside of that, to Councilmember Damian's point, the sales tax measure is indeed a general revenue measure, which means that unlike a specific special purpose tax, which does delineates a specific use of it, this is a general tax, which means it can be used for anything that is related to the government, to the city government. So short of it never being a gifting of public funds, that you cannot do. But outside of that, it's up to your recommendation to the city council and ultimately the city council deciding if it's an appropriate use of it or not. In terms of how some of the preferences were articulated during the education phase of the measure, and because knowing that it was a general tax, as Councilmember Damian mentioned is there was mention about, well, we don't want this to go just for increasing the salaries of staff. There was a general sentiment about that, right? As if, you know, if we were just going to take the money and, oh, by the way, we're going to increase staff salaries. So, but, you know, the idea is that it not be perceived as that. The idea is that it's workforce development so that, you know, the staff that work for you and work for the residents are in fact, you know, productive. And so I'm hoping it doesn't seem like it's not being perceived as we're padding employees' pocketbooks here. That's not how I intend this to come across, but I think that's how you interpret it, Councilmember Damon.
No, I mean, obviously, no, I didn't interpret it as you're trying to pad staff's paychecks, but, you know, it was really hard for us to earn the community's trust, especially the history that's gone on the city council for the last several years. And, you know, when I decided to take on this and be out there in these community meetings to push for this measure, obviously one of the reasons was because I would prefer to capitalize that money and keep it within our city here versus the county coming in later and increasing our tax. And then we're, you know, asking for pennies just the way we're doing with Measure H, right? But one of the other reasons why I took on this was because I made a promise to the residents, and we did, right, that these funds were going to be used for the benefit of our community. It was going to be, we even gave examples as here, you know, we're building this. Look at your tax dollars at work. So you're actually seeing what your Measure BP funds are doing for the community. And people that did speak out against the measure were right away, the first thing that we're assuming was, you know, we don't trust you guys because, you know, they don't know there's been a shift or whatever it may have been. But one of the things was, we don't trust you. What, you know, how do we know you're not going to use this money to go and give the executives raises or whatever it is? That's the perception the community had, and maybe some still have, right? So we earned their trust, and that was, you know, that was seen with the results of the voting last November. So my thing is that I think that we have other items on this list that, you know, obviously not speaking to which ones they should prioritize, but I think that we have other items on this list to choose from that can be a bigger priority to the community versus our city workforce development. Because as an example, let's just say the SOC recommended, let's go ahead and go with option B and let's prioritize this, take it to the council, and council agrees. What's going to happen when we go and say, this is what we did. The first thing we did with Measure BP funds is we invested in city work development, right? When we had a whole list of other options that to me have more priority right now, because I think that there's some items here that we should still be doing, regardless of whether there's Measure BP funds or not. But for us to prioritize city workforce development at this point in time, I think would be a big mistake. And it would just show our residents that they were right. I mean, you know, it's the perception that they have. So we need to let them know that they trusted us for a reason. And that I think that we're going to be able to prioritize projects that they're going to be proud of and that they're going to be happy that they're paying sales tax for, versus it going to salaries or, you know, recruiting new staff, which I know we desperately need. But I think that we should figure out another way to fund those versus using Measure BP funds for this particular item.
Go ahead.
I think what you have been voicing out is one thing that I was thinking about as we were going through this is, what do the residents want, right? I think for me, what would be helpful is, this is all great and it's amazing. And I think we could probably either add or review and add our comments to this. But, you know, what was it that when these meetings were held was discussed? What were the residents' priority? And if I heard correctly, that was something that they voiced out a concern over. So why, I would say, let's not to remove it, but to actually notify, or for us to be aware of these things. What was it that they wanted to utilize the funds for, and what didn't they want it to be used for? And I think it's a valid concern. It is a valid concern to me as well, because I think that if we are hosting these meetings with the residents and the residents are specifically indicating that that was their fear, and we go ahead and we start looking at something that they did not want, I think the trust is going to be, we're going to fail.
So to add to that, Mr. Salivat, is there a way to either obtain that information or maybe revisit having those meetings again, just to see where we're at today? Just because I think the way I'm understanding it, Pastor Jackson, along with the boundaries, is we are the voice of our community. We're the advocates of our community, aside from obviously having our own opinions or perceptions of what we need. But I think as we gather all of this information and take everything into account, I think that piece would be really critical.
Yeah, and I had indicated it during the presentation as well as in the report, and clearly saying it now. The idea is for you to have community meetings. Yes. Now, in terms of the specificity, I mean, Councilmember Daniel, this is not by any means trying to revisit the education. And yeah, there was a campaign associated with the measure. But let's just talk about the education phase. And we did have opposition from folks who were opposing the measure. But, I think much of the sentiment about whether it's going to go for salaries came from that opposition side. Now, if we're going to tailor the program around those folks that were opposing it, well, then that's one thing. As opposed to, ensuring that, nothing in this is somehow underhanded. It's important, if we are not going to recognize that workforce development is important for the residents as a way of ensuring that staff is responsive to them. That's one thing. The folks who vocalize their opposition to whether this was just going to be an underhanded way of ensuring that salaries get increased. If we only respond to them, yes, this should not be at all a category. It's very clear. But, and we can definitely take it out if that is something that the committee feels that we should not even imply. This is not an implication, it's a statement, right? We don't want this to be somehow underhanded in a way in which somehow we end up directing any of the Measure BP funds towards salaries, but we're not open about it. So that was the other reason for why I threw it on here. But we can just as easily remove it as a category. But I recommend that you leave it in there. But, as you hear the community in this community meetings, it's not because it's an affront to them, but because if they have absolutely no interest a year and a half later, then clearly we got to remove it.
So I have two more questions. I know that this is just a list right now. So I understand what you meant with that statement, but is this a living document in the sense that it keeps morphing and changing, whether it's adding, taking away, or is it something that we have to finalize at some point?
You would want to have a final at some point, but then, it's like perhaps every year or every 2 years, it would need to be updated, right? Because there may be new priorities or new categories then. But this should be good for a good couple of years.
Okay.
Once you finalize it.
And then the process of adding, we would just give feedback here. Like if there was something we wanted added to this.
You can, yeah. So say, there will be specific projects I'll give you an example. There's several small little projects under street infrastructure as an example that we have no way of addressing. So we have sidewalks that are a problem. We have areas where drainage is an issue. Those probably will come to you sooner than later as proposals. And so those will become specific proposals to you, which depending on how we time it, we wouldn't want to bring anything forward until you have finalized the categorization. And then the specific project will come to you, and then you will prioritize them within the category.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I would like to ask a question. I don't mean to backtrack or anything, but I'm thinking about my wife and I have a bank account. And we put all of our stuff in there, and either one of us could use it as we so desire. Now, the stockholders' money, the BP money, is in with the city's money. Am I right or wrong with that? It's all in one pile.
No, you'll get a report under item 3 of our Measure BP revenue. That's being kept separate.
Okay, so that money is kept separate. Okay, and so that money that's set aside, that's what we work on and developing and spending for the community.
Correct.
Okay, and also with this is there are some natural things that the city should be doing. Does that include with the BP money?
In some cases, if there is a leveraging of other funds that the council has control over, and it's combined with Measure BP money, yeah. Otherwise, though, your recommendation making will be strictly for Measure BP funds. Strictly Measure BP funds. But let's say there's a paving project. And I'll use the two-way radio example for police, okay? Let's say that project cost $1 million, and I'm just throwing numbers out, okay? Because not because that's what I think the cost is. The chief may know what the cost is, but I'm not going to ask him. Okay. But let's just say it's $1 million. But Measure BP, as you juggle different priorities, so we can fund. I would recommend that we fund $500,000. Should the other $500,000, and will the other $500,000 be funded by the city council from another source of funds, like the general fund? You know, that is to be determined. But let's say SOC feels that only $500,000 should be funded. The proposal is going to come to you for full funding. Let's say for full funding, but you say, well, we don't want to commit so much of the SOC money to this one request right now at this point. So, you know, that's something to be determined on a case-by-case basis.
If I may. And then you do make a great point, Enrique, because as he stated, you know, just because they come to you with, let's just say an amount of $2 million, you don't have to allocate the full $2 million from Measure BP. You guys, with it among yourselves, can decide, like he said, you know, we feel comfortable allocating $500,000 for this particular project. And then another thing, you know, that I wanted to mention that I forgot earlier was we still want to go out there as a city and obtain grants. So as an example, I know we're going to talk on item 2 later, but let's just say, for example, you know, there's a project coming up, and let's just say that the sports complex became a reality. We still want to go out there and try to obtain any type of grants that we can to help us construct and build this, and then use the rest of it from Measure BP to complete the cost. So you can always still do that for any project, right, Enrique? We still want to go out there and actively as staff, go out there, and we don't want to forget about the grants just because we have Measure BP funding. We want to still go out there, try to get as much as we can from these grants. And then let's just say we get a portion of it, we can complete the project using Measure BP funds. So those are other options that we have because we don't want to stop looking for those grants.
So anybody else have any questions?
I have a, you want to go?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. So Enriquez, should we look at new projects like the radios for the police department? That's our priority side, or are we going to look at a portion of BP money, Measure BP money used for shortfalls that the general fund is not supplying, such as like sidewalks? You're short $200,000 to finish off the sidewalks in the east side of Ballpark Park. Should there be a portion of the BP money set aside for shortfalls that we have currently, or should we look at new projects with a 90% till basically, where we're going to spend the money on new projects and new things that come to us as a stakeholders committee?
Yes, so there's an exciting portion to all of this, right? Actually, most of it is really exciting, but you will see in the revenue report that, the revenue's coming in, and that's right. And you'll see, well, it's in the attachment, so you see that it's growing. Part of what is in the realm of the SOC is to sort of apply a certain philosophy to your question, Greg. Is it better to really make projects that would not otherwise happen without Measure BP money a reality? Sports complex being a perfect example, right? Because that project cannot happen unless Measure BP provide some funding, like Councilmember Damian indicated. That doesn't mean that we are not going to be looking for matching funds or philanthropy or some other complementary revenue sources, but without Measure BP, there's no way that could be made possible. I put in the street infrastructure for those smaller projects because those could give us some quick, simple examples of bringing something to reality, sort of putting in place a public engagement system, utilizing small projects in scope that don't have a lot of money associated with it to then be able to test out public engagement for the purposes of the SOC, so that if we end up doing let's just say an ADA ramp or a handicap ramp or baby stroller ramp in a block. So let's say we still have some intersections or some areas that we don't have those ramps, and it's $50,000. Maybe something that we want to bring forward to you because it gives us the ability to engage with the community, engage with the public, for them to see BP dollars at work in a simple, inexpensive way, and generate interest, generate attention to BP, the measure. So it's got a lot of other derivative procedural benefits, and they're not necessarily a supplantation of general fund. Because obviously, if general fund could pay for it, we would have already paid and done it. So those are deficiencies and needs of funding that are small, but will probably stay unresponded to unless Measure BP is able to help.
Oh, wait, Maria and then Sasha.
Okay.
So my question really is more about, do we have, and I think I probably asked this in the last meeting, do we have either notes or anything from the meetings that were held with the residents? So it can kind of help us, kind of see what was indicated that was a want from them?
Yes, we have that, and we will recompile it and bring it to you by meeting. We had several meetings. And we have a summary of each of the meetings.
Do we have like an ETA on when we can get those documents?
Let me see if we took minutes. Darn it.
I don't think, I'm sorry.
Or
to
just
interrupt.
notes?
I don't think we did. That's how I don't think there was any minutes taken because those were at the meetings were at the schools. I don't recall any minutes or any meeting notes taken. I know these were held last year around August. Honestly, my recommendation would be for them to hear it for themselves. I think that the best thing to do, instead of even going back to even, try to find notes or whatever it is, let's just host a few meetings, community meetings, and let's let them, host the meeting and answer any questions and hear that it's just better for you guys to hear it for yourselves, what it is. And it could be that the community's input changed from last year to now. Maybe now the priorities are no longer the sports park and public safety. Maybe it's something different. So I think that it would be best for us to host those meetings, like it was mentioned at the last meeting, so that they can hear it for themselves.
I agree. And we would obviously we started to think about the planning, and as soon as you get this to a point where we can at least have a starting point for discussion, start organizing the community meetings.
And if I may, I do agree with having new meetings, and I think that is really what our goal, and I think it was discussed that we wanted to do that. But for me, I was just thinking, like, when you come back and you say, let's have a meeting to discuss what you guys want. If we have some of the same residents that were there in the past, they're going to say, well, we were here and we told you what we wanted. So I think it's better to have some sort of transparency and say, this is what we remember was indicated that were wants, but we are here to get like new feedback from you, versus just ignoring the fact that there were no notes taken or anything done with their request or their feedback given before. Even if there were not notes, and I'm not saying let's go look for the notes, but just the feedback that council member Damian provided was huge, because we know a couple of things that were wanted, or a few priorities. And I think if we could base on, this is what was discussed in the past and we're here to revisit, and this is what the wants were before, I think it'll help versus coming in brand new and saying, let's meet to see what you want, and not even acknowledge that there were wants in the past.
Sure. No, completely understand. In fact, SOC, your SOC is part of that promise, because the council made the promise for there to be oversight. And as soon as the measure passed, we proceeded to bring the ordinance that enacted your creation. And that was part of the promise, probably the most salient promise that was made, Councilmember Damian, that promise of oversight, accountability, and transparency and representation. In fact, you saw how you were selected by a drawing. That was I would say front and center, the most important pledge that was made during the education process. And so, yes, upholding that trust. So we will look up the best way we can summarize those notes. I mean, there were many of us in those meetings, so there should be plenty of recollection, okay? Even if we don't have notes, there were always at least several of us here at this table, Councilmember Damian, almost every meeting. So yeah, we can do that, compile from a recollection what the notes were. And still, if you agree, still schedule a series of new meetings, because it is, in a way, sort of like a new beginning.
And what you can do, Enrique, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but because you brought up a great point, you guys were a promise that was made to the community, that because when they were asking, well, how do we know you guys are not just going to blow the money? we did say we were going to have an oversight committee and be as transparent as possible. So one of the things that you can do is when you bring these meetings back is say, here's the oversight committee that was selected at, lottery or random, introduce the committee members to them and say, these are your representatives that are going to make sure that they're keeping the city council accountable and city staff accountable. And they're here now that the measure has passed. Now they're here to listen to you. And what is it that you want your tax dollars to be prioritized on? Because when we held these meetings, this was a pre-context, right? This was before we even knew if it was going to be passed or not. But now that it's set in stone and it's passed, now you guys can take that approach and say, we're here to represent you. And I want to hear from you. What is your priority? And what do you want to see Measure BP funds be used for? And that's how you can just start the conversation and hear from them and see if anything has changed at that point in time from the feedback that we've given you from what we've heard back last year.
I may have cut you off.
Yeah,
I
it's
think-
okay. I'll go next here. As Damien said here, things that were talked about a year ago at these meetings, it has changed. Certain things that were public safety wasn't even addressed here. There's a lot of mental health issues at all these meetings, people calling police and waiting 30, 40 minutes. Now our police staff has grown to a suitable size now where my neighbors say, I see the police cars here all the time now going down the streets. The comfort level's different in that aspect with the police department. That's off to you, chief. At a standoff right next door to my house, textbook, the whole 9 yards, held them off for 2 or 3 hours, and then a drone did all the things. And the neighbors comment how well the police department handled that situation. So we're at these meetings last year. The seniors had a lot of input at those meetings, right, George? We had the youth baseball leagues getting smaller, roadrunners not being around after COVID, and our sports league getting smaller. But the growth is starting to come back now. So it is kind of what we did a year ago. The census has changed a bit. And I think having 4 or 5, whatever it takes to go out and see the community again, and I think they will have a different taste in their mouth. And now that we have actual dollars in our hands to spend, I think we'll get a lot more feedback, not only from 1 or 2 people, it'll be more people attending instead of some of them were 4 or 5 people, some of it was cricket land. But I think what we did a year ago, we set the seed, and we're here now to make the plant grow. So I'm all in favor of new meetings and providing input. What was 12 months ago is handy to have. I think the new members that were not at those meetings should have something to go on so we could see what changed in the last 12 months.
So real quick, I want everyone's voice to be heard. So I'm actually going to go back this way and start with Sasha and then go here and then to Jorge. Just so everybody can get their comments and questions. Go ahead.
I just want to echo what everyone else has been saying. I really do think that these community meetings are a priority, at least from my opinion, because someone who was not at the meeting, but seeing that recruitment and retention of city staff, because honestly, some of these things will not be able to get done without the city's support and having that support. And if we make sure we know that it's not just going to salaries of current staff, it's about bringing in new ones so these projects can be uplifted, that might have a different taste in the community's mouth, and this time they might feel supported. They might also just hate it and be like, no, for sure, we don't want that. And that gives us security that this is what they want now. This is what we want currently, rather than scrambling for notes that we have a year ago. Because I'll be honest, a year ago, I don't remember what I thought about this. I just remember voting and saying, yes, this sounds like a good idea. But I had no idea what to even think about where this money was going to. And I think a lot of community felt that way. They're like, it's a great idea, but is this going to happen? And as everyone says, it has happened. We're here to make it seem, we're here to let the community know it's happening in their neighborhood, because they probably voted on it and never thought about it again. And I think if we have these meetings, it's not just going to be great to hear from them, but it's going to encourage people who maybe missed those meetings to come to our meetings here and be like, I missed that community meeting, but I'm here to say or call in. And this is what we need to do for not just us to get a better idea of what we're doing and maybe create new ideas that none of us in this room thought about that we're like, that's a really good idea. But to not be relying on something that was a year ago and start fresh. I like that idea a lot and feel very strongly about that. And I don't think we should be moving forward with a lot of stuff and even thinking about finalizing this list until we hear what our community is saying.
Yeah, so I moved here about less than a year ago. So I don't know what was said a year ago. So whatever was said a year ago that came up with this would suck. And it's just unbaffled. There was no minutes, no notes. So if we can get some of the notes before we can finalize what is the priority, I would like to do that first. And I also think we should have more than just one meeting. 2 or 3 meetings will have different people show up. Like you said, the first meeting might be somebody brand spanking new, right? Like me, talking about something else that was not talked about a year ago. Maybe the second meeting, the words has spread out. They want to see what's going on. When I look at the list that you already compiled, a lot of these, I feel lies on the city, the general fund. For the SOC to be approved, part of it, some of it is more like instant gratification for the city hall to alleviate the pressure from the public. Before I want to put my name on it, I would like to see what the city population really wants. Based on, you said, it's more like something tangible. They want to see it, right? More workers, more workforce, they don't see it. Maybe that will backfire. I just want to see what do we really want before I step forward and say, you know what? Yep, I'm good with this. That's all.
Yes, for some of you that you weren't to the meetings last year, right here on the let me see, on the investment opportunity categories, we did discuss item C, D, E, G, H, and I. We discuss all those matters to the community. And we have the flyers. Unfortunately, I didn't say one, but we discussed all this on 6 items to the community. And most of them, they agree. Like Councilman Damien said, we were having a hard time to convince them because of a previous administrations, the mishandling of the funds. But these items were the ones that we discussed with the community, and I'm sure and positive if we discuss it again, they'll go for all these items because that's what we explained to them how the funds or Measure BP were going to work for the community. And I'm sure if we have meetings, and we mention this to them, they probably agree. Also, city workforce, I would like to ask a question. How do we maintain our police officers here in our city or employees? I don't want them to go someplace else. I don't want this city to be a training camp for them because we had them in the future. I mean, in the past, sorry. They come over here, they get the experience they want, they go someplace else. And to me, priority is to keep him here in our community. I don't want them to go nowhere. I don't want no county agency come over here and patrol my city because our officers know our city, they know our community. But yeah, getting back to all these items, that's what we discussed on the meetings when we were at school. Thank you.
Anything else, Pastor Jackson?
I might back up or get out of place here a little bit, but we had a visitation at Pico Rivera, and I was quite impressed in how the people use their money. And I really would suggest that we take tours to see how other cities have invested their money. And our priority is our city, the city that we're in. And I was impressed with what I saw. And like the same thing to happen here may not be a duplicate of what's happening, but our city can look and see this is how we're spending our money.
But yeah, anything else?
I agree. I think it's a great idea for us to learn from others and see how we can implement here. But I still think that maybe our first priority should be to meet with the people and for us to review what was discussed. And I know that you indicated a couple of these items that were discussed or that were presented. I'm more interested in not what was presented, but what the people wanted. And so that's why I was asking for that. But I do agree, it would be great for us to see how other cities are implementing, making, use of their money and see how we can also learn from them, right? But for me, I think it would be great to focus on gathering the notes, reviewing them, and then having the meetings with our residents again. And I think it is a big win, the fact that we're here, the fact that, this committee was created because that's what they wanted. So I think maybe highlighting that again and letting them know we heard you. This is what you first wanted. We now have them and they're here to hear you out. Thank you.
So I guess I'm thinking next steps. Is it possible to get that feedback from those meetings before our next meeting? Because I think you're correct. This is going to be a discussion, maybe 2-3 meetings. So I think having that obviously before we finalize the list, but also in addition to how do we move forward scheduling those meetings?
Or we can definitely compile the best recollection with all the folks who were in these meetings. Because I think we all know we don't have minutes, but we have a way of recreating that. And we can do that. And let's see, would you want to see it at the next meeting, or would you want us to send it out prior to the next meeting?
I think prior to the next meeting so that we have an opportunity to marinate and see what was on there.
Okay.
Because again, I didn't realize and I understand things change, like you said, in a year it might look different, but if we're going to finalize that list, I think we all want to be comfortable with what we are putting on the list.
Absolutely. And we will also send you the language that went on the ballot itself. So you see what folks saw when they
Voted.
decided to vote yes or no. I mean, because, that representation is obviously very important. We mentioned about there being oversight. We didn't say what kind of oversight. It was the council's ordinance that created you guys, but the pledge was that there would be oversight. And so that, to you, all of your points, this is proof of it. You are the proof of it. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
You are proof of it. So yes, and then we'll compile the notes from those meetings.
And then as far as the meetings moving forward, who would schedule those, or how do we? I guess I just want us to know too, what does that look like?
Yeah, we will organize them
Okay.
for you.
Okay.
I mean, if you can express a preference, I think I heard maybe 3 community meetings as a general direction.
I think that's good. And then we can decide after that, especially depending on turnout and feedback.
Yeah, the timing, and so as a general direction, about 3 meetings, evening meetings for the convenience of the residents, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I can just, Enrique, quick question for you regarding the list. So are you going to have them or instruct them to eliminate and add and make the priority list? Or are you just going to leave the list as is and have them prioritize from within the list and anything that they may add.
So we will definitely make sure that this is stamped and presented as a draft for now. And then the final population and look of it will be after the SOC gives the feedback if they want things taken out, added, replaced, then that'll become the final. But right now, this is only a draft. And, you know, you can instruct us to even at this point, take anything out or add, or leave it as a working document.
I think for now, leave it as a working document. And then we can go from there after we see the compilation of those notes.
Yes.
I just think my only other, I guess, and maybe we can discuss this next month, because again, we're not going to wrap this piece tonight. But obviously, I understand that even as members on the SOC committee, that if there's anything we want added, it's still not finalized. We still obviously want the feedback of the community in terms of what we feel might need to be on there. But is that also something that we would discuss here as a team, or do we just send that to you? Like if there's something that we saw that we wanted added to the list?
You can do it here, or you can send me a note and an email. Because in the end, you will have to vote
Right.
to approve it anyway. So we can populate it as the thought comes to your mind. That way you don't lose the thought, and send me a note.
Okay, so I don't know if anybody had the time to think that far ahead, but I just want to throw something out there. Chief Lopez, I know that since the dissolution of our school police, you're just an amazing chief. But I know you've done really great work in terms of supporting the district. But I know one of the things that came to my mind, and I don't know if it goes under public safety or miscellaneous. And again, I don't know if this is a need that would be identified, but I was even thinking of having like an officer with a special assignment that would support the school district directly, because right now, I don't know if that's pulling resources from your team.
Well, there's a couple of things that I've been looking at. So as we're continuing to hire, I'm looking at the various ways of using those officers. And the department before I got here had corporals. So I have redesigned the position of a corporal and looking to implement them as part of managing or a more community response. So if there's a park, what I'm looking at is if there's a park and there's a school in a certain section, we have 4 beats.
Okay.
So I would look at a corporal or maybe 2 corporals. I'm not sure yet. We're still working through the details, but assigning a corporal to schools and parks. So that would be their main function. And then in addition to responding to calls for service and those kind of things. But the calling would be that's what they're responsible for. I'm still trying to design it because I'm talking discussing that with the POA, the Police Officer Association, because I want to work with them, and the prior way they were using were not what I would consider to be right. So we're changing that. I've got to do some things with the POA and their attorneys so that I can redesign that position. But that's what my intention is to make sure that I cover the schools, make sure that you have the school has a face to see there, as well as the parks. So it's taken a little time because we're so far behind in hiring that it's taken us time to catch up. And I'm not hiring just because I can. I'm hiring for the community, and that was my promise, is that they're being hired for the community, and they're here because they want to be here.
Right. So thank you. And like I said, I don't know if there's a need, but I know that, there's 2 sides to everything, but I know that some parents felt that there was a strong need to still continue to have that direct support. And again, I know that your department is capable of doing it. I just didn't know how much that's pulling the resource, because I know for a long time you were shorthanded.
Yes, ma'am. It shouldn't pull from the resources because it's going to be an additional duty for the corporals, or additional duty for the officers that are assigned to that. Because right now I've got I have 1 officer assigned to homeless, and that's all he does.
Right.
Is impact the visible homeless and those kind of things that we're dealing with. So that's my intent, is to continue to progress forward and do those things and assigning officers to specific details that it's a community-based organization.
Okay.
Question about the meetings, community meetings, where will that take place?
Most likely in school locations or park locations. The ones that we had were in the school cafeterias. In fact, Manny found he found the flyer that we used. You want to show it to the yeah, hand it. So see, we're already reconstructing the engagement period. So we use these flyers and we then added a second round of community meetings because the first few were, as Greg pointed out, the participation was rather sparse. And then we ended up having more meetings and, we did have one or two in which we had a good number of people. But by and large, it was a limited number of participants. But yeah, you'll see the venues on there. It's the school sites. We had one at the Esther Snyder Community Center. I don't know if I think we had one at the Arc Center.
Julia McNeil Senior Center.
Senior Center, that's correct. So there were two rounds of this engagement. So this was one of the flyers and then we had a second flyer. So, okay,
So I just,
that's where the sites would be.
and I just had a question because I understand we're on a timeline and trying to finalize this, but I also want to be realistic that I don't want something like this to pop up and then it's like, oh, shoot, I missed it and it's next week or it's tonight. So realistically, would we expect that these meetings, I mean, what's the soonest that they would happen? But taking into account that there's enough notice for the community.
Listening to you guys' comment and Councilmember Damian's comments, we need to make more of a splash about the SOC being created. Okay, we haven't. I mean, we had the SORN in, I don't think we even did a press release, Manny. We got to show you off. It's a big deal. So I say that, we really promote you coming to the community. And so we would want to have at least 3 weeks time to be able to do the run up of, we'll do a press release, Councilmember Damian, I think, of their first community meeting. So that, we highlight the SOC. So I say 3 weeks, give us 3 weeks for that first meeting. And then the others can follow like a week apart or 2 weeks apart. But, your time availability, if we go with the evening, hopefully that's safe ground, but we will coordinate the best we can so that you all can be available.
Also, keep in mind, Enrique, the holidays are coming.
Yes.
It may be, we don't want to jump too much into November, December
Oh,
because people are out or, they're just too busy. So we're already, mid-September?
Yes.
I think that we should probably shoot for October. The earlier part of October, middle October gives us enough time. I don't know, Manny, do you have a picture of the SOC? Maybe it would be a good idea if you take them a picture right now with your phone. That way we can at least have them, the faces to the SOC and kind of promote that on social media. Or when we start promoting the meetings, but I think that we got to work on it now so that we don't get these meetings out into November. We want to maybe get them in no later than mid-October before the holiday season starts to come around.
Very good. So we'll shoot for mid-October for the first meeting and then a week apart, the other two, or within a week.
okay. That gives us a month. So that's good.
Three meetings. Okay. Yeah. 3 meetings. But the picture, Manny, that's a great idea. Right now that they're in their best pose.
Take it now or?
Yeah, take it now, if you don't mind.
I just want to add, there was actually an article that was written by the San Gabriel Valley Tribune about the SOC committee being selected. And then there was also a social media post by our, I think it was, I don't know if it was the city or if it was our mayor, that actually there was something, a mention of it, but I do think we should highlight it.
You're right. There was the article by the Tribune, and they quoted, yes. So, and then we'll generate more.
That's what was a good turnout and just.
Actually, back then we had 16 meetings.
Oh, wow.
So there was actually 16 meetings, right? Enriquez,
Greg?
when we started the meetings at the schools, there's a round of 16 meetings, not just 8.
That second round.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start with the 3B evening times. Maybe we throw in one weekend in the morning.
Yes, for convenience of the residents, our city attorney just reminded me, this will be Brown acted meeting, so we will have to post like a regular meeting, which is fine. It's just ensure that we follow the public notice for it being a regular meeting of the SOC, or a special meeting.
So I do want to ask my colleagues up here. So if we start with those 4 meetings to kind of see what that turnout is, do we want to start with those 4 and then potentially add, or do we just want to go all out and just do as many? So do we want to do those 4 and then see where we're at? In January? Okay. Okay. So can we do 3 evenings during the week and then 1 weekend in the morning?
Okay, so 4 meetings,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Enrique, may I just add a comment in regards to making a splash about our SOC. First, I just want to thank all of you guys for your service to our community. It's an incredible and diverse group of individuals who have demonstrated their commitment to our community. So thank you very much for your service. But I do think that a great way of making a splash is actually making a web page completely dedicated to the SOC. And I'd actually recommend having them come in maybe before next meeting or come in someday to take a headshot. Like we'll just in-house, we'll take headshots and put up their biographies. You know, every single person serving on this SOC has a very diverse background. And as you know, there was many categories in which the law, it made somebody eligible in the lottery from their background in youth sports or their background in nonprofits regardless. And so I think our community needs to know who these individuals are and what they bring to the table, because it's an impressive resume, an impressive list of accomplishments and achievements and representation here on the dais tonight. And I know that, and our council member knows that, and you know that, because we get to read these staff reports and we get to hear it at our council meetings, but the community doesn't. And so I think we do need to make a splash about them and reaffirm and reiterate and certainly establish in in every way possible of the confidence that our community should have in this incredible group of people. So I think if there's anything I can help you with, we need to ensure that our community knows how great of a team that we have.
Definitely promote you. You'll see. Yes.
So then I think we'll continue this discussion next month. We're obviously not finished today. We can continue to digest and marinate with the information, especially with the notes that are compiled. And then we look forward to getting updates as far as when those meetings will be scheduled. So now we'll move on to item number 2, which is the sports complex project, the conceptual visioning process.
Yes, the the more exciting part of the meeting for today, well, actually, the more exciting part will be item number 3, but this is one in which you know, as a general consensus, and I mean general consensus because things that were picked up during the education phase and certainly and as an important point for the city council was the idea of a sports complex in our city. And those of you like Greg, who is in the sports world, will have a particular sensitivity to what this represents. But and I alluded to two events that have taken place in the last year that have given a brighter illumination to this possibility of a sports complex in our city. Number one, something that Chair Lara is very much aware, but everyone knows that the school district is going through a decommissioning process of campuses. 2 elementary schools have already been decommissioned, one in Pleasantview, and there's more under review. Now, what that represents is potentially sites that could be made available for a sports complex, as an example. And number 2, it's the availability of Measure BP funds, right? A year ago, we couldn't talk about any of this because one, are there even sites that this can be could be placed in, and is there any funding? Well, now, conceivably, we have both. So it's a transformative turn of events a year later. And so we have began what I call, and what is presented to you as the visioning conceptual phase of what the sports complex can have and should have. For now, what it can have. The range can be from a very ambitious scope, you know, of it being an all-inclusive kind of facility that embodies and includes every conceivable kind of sport, including the latest trend out there, pickleball, right? And who would have thought 3 years ago, at least most folks said, what is pickleball? But I finally came to play it, so I could understand what pickleball is. What is this craze is all about? So, you know, you can see how things can change in the sports world, right? We now have a all-girls flag football team at Sierra Vista High School. You know, that's a new thing, and we didn't have that before. So, what should be in this sports center? Sports complex, and rather than being unduly worried at this juncture about what the cost of it is going to be, I gave you a range. You know, we're talking somewhere between $15 million to $60 million, and much of it obviously will depend on what goes in it, and whether we have a site that is not where we have to purchase a property, but maybe through some kind of arrangement with the school district where we don't have to purchase the site. So that can make a big difference on the ultimate total cost. So what we have presented to you is a list of reference locations, each one selected for what feature it may represent as you lay out a vision for this sports complex. So if I can have the next PowerPoint, Mark, for item number 2. Okay, so this is 11 locations that we have compiled through work in your staff, my office, Manny, and then we have one consultant who helped us on this. Oh, there you are. Frank Sanchez helped us compile this list. And And so we will go over each one of these reference locations. And these are actual facilities. They're not being proposed. They are built and they're operating. So we will go over each one. If we, next slide, please. This is a summary of the 11 locations. You will see that they're not listed. They're not listed in any order. I hope you don't think of us as being oversensitive about not laying out any sense of prioritization just by the order and by which we list these things. So, you know, you'll see we have one in Chino Hills, down Upland, Irwindale, La Puente, West Covina. Next slide. Southgate, Bell Gardens, West Covina, a second one in West Covina, and then 2 in Glendale. These are all local, within driving distance locations. So, you know, we didn't pick anything in the San Francisco area that would require us to fly up there. So this is all within driving distance of Baldwin Park. The idea, and as we go through all 11 of them, is that we recommend that we do site visits where we organize a field trip. You know, I think Pastor Jackson alluded to when we went to Pico Rivera. I think Jorge and Greg, I don't know if Greg, you made it to Pico Rivera. So very, very informational when you do the site visits. But these are the 11. Next slide, please. We begin with Chino Hills, and why we chose this, it's that you can see the size of the development, 33 acres. I mean, you know, this is obviously not applicable in terms of the site being 33 acres. We wouldn't have that. Even one of those gravel pits, well, those may be 33 acres and some, but you know, we don't have a 33-acre site. But what this does, though, sort of stretches the imagination of sorts, because if we had this much land available, these are the kinds of things that one could do. And this is what Chino Hills did, right? You see, they have incredible number of fields. You go to this place, and I've been to it a few times. I think, Benny, you just recently went there for a soccer game. And just the degree of community activity that happens at this location, it's just mostly youth sports, but they also have, I think, one adult playing field. It's just incredible the number of games that go on at a given time. 2 softball fields. You see the number of things they have on here. 5 soccer fields. And something unique that I have not seen in other places, they do an overlay. So in a soccer field or in a baseball field, they also are able to do a soccer field as an overlay. So same field being utilized for two sports without one impacting the other. Next slide, please. This is an aerial view of it, but you can see 4 diamonds, and you barely see the lines of the soccer overlay fields. So on any given time, you could have games going on. It's like half of the city of Chino Hills seems to be at this location when all these games are going on. Very vibrant, very active. Next slide. There's a depiction of, you know, what the fields look like. While I thought that this was a fairly new park, it's been in existence, but they just went through a major renovation, and that's why you see the field being looking almost brand new. Next slide. They also have some traditional park activities, the playground, picnic areas, which is complimentary for when the teams are playing, families who end up spending the whole day there. They have a place to go eat and picnic. Next slide. Downey Sports Complex, fairly new. Now you will notice that in most of these reference locations, we did not include a cost. We want to be cautionary on depicting a cost because some of the publicly available figures are figures from maybe when it was first built 20 years ago, and they've done several renovations since then, and in the end, the cost that they make available publicly may not necessarily be all inclusive. So we wouldn't want to be giving you a wrong impression of what the cost range is. So on some of these that we do not feel comfortable or confident on what the public figure is for cost, we just didn't include a cost. But here, this is 8 acres, roughly, the size of one of the school sites. For example, I think Pleasant View is just around 10 acres as an example, if we were to have the entire site available for the sports complex. So this will be more comparable in size than Chino Hills. And next slide, please. Now here, I believe the grass doesn't look as well kept as the one in Chino Hills. So whether they had natural grass as opposed to artificial grass, and you'll see on some of the other facilities, they've gone with the artificial turf. Next slide. Now, there you have an example of them gone with artificial turf in one of their fields. Next slide. This one we chose to include in the list because there's one particular feature that I want you to see. Well, two features that I believe have a benefit for comparison for us. One, this is a mostly philanthropic funded development. This was all funded by philanthropic contributions. To Councilmember Damian's point earlier about how not just Measure BP funding can be brought to bear, but also matching funds from grants or philanthropy. This was entirely funded by a number of organizations and families within the city of Upland. Does the name Shoe Family YMCA, and it's got both indoors, and what's most striking about this facility is their aquatics swimming pool. You'll see it in the next slides. Next slide, please. Okay, this is an aerial of the swimming pool area looking toward the main building, but what you see here in this glassy looking building, that's actually the aquatics swimming pool center. And next slide. Oh, you can already see it here. The roof is retractable. What makes it so special is that most pools, and Manny can tell you, most indoor pools, if they're not properly ventilated, and hardly any of them are, pick up that sort of misty smell, right? It's not appealing by and large. Here, the roof is retractable, so they can open up the roof to create a natural ventilation. So the smell of the chlorine and the misty is never there. It's spectacular. Just that feature alone. Next slide. Look at the inside. It's all glass enclosed. It's indoors, but you feel like you're outdoors. I mean, I've been to the facility, so I know it's just amazing. and frankly, I don't know the cost yet, but you know, when we do the site visit, we'll get into more of the costs. But I felt that that feature alone was worth for us to go visit this facility. Next. They also have a gym and most YMCA facilities are fitness centers as well, so they have a full array of exercise equipment. Next. They have an indoor soccer playing field, all of it indoors. Next. Closer to home, right up the street on Main and Arrow Highway. You guys have seen it. It's the Care Youth League, a nonprofit. I think it's affiliated with the A Church, but they developed this site not long ago, 2018, and why we felt it wanted to be in a reference location is that this probably would be more on the range of a modest facility. You know, nothing spectacular as far as an indoor facility, no aquatics, and the fields is a limited number of them, but well kept and certainly provides a good place. But and it's just off the street, so very, very convenient to be able to go see it. This, as well as the one in Upland. The one in Upland is located at a city park, but it was developed by the YMCA using philanthropy. They have a long-term lease agreement with the city of Upland. The lease is $1 a year, and I forget for how many years. Not unlike what we could likely strike with the school district. A long-term lease, 100-year lease, for $1 a year, and then the city would operate it, right? But this one here, Care, is the land is owned by the Corps of Engineers. Care leases it from the Corps. I do not know if it's for $1 a year. That we will verify. But it's in the city of Irwindale. So how much involvement did the city of Irwindale had beyond permitting? We do not know that yet, but we touch base with the city of Irwindale so we can understand their involvement as a city. But as a facility, we'll work with the Care folks to arrange a tour if this is one of the locations you choose for us to go. Next. Next picture. So they have all the outdoor sports. Well, not all of them, but softball. They have soccer, and they have football. Youth sports. Next picture. Next picture. La Puente, also very close to us. This is a facility that was first built in 1961. So you can imagine, it's been in existence for that long, but they went through a major renovation very recently. Somewhere in the order of $12 to $15 million renovation. And they rededicated the facility and called it a sports complex. Before, I think it was just a park, but now it's a sports complex. They added all these outdoor sport fields and courts, and you can see the list on there: basketball courts, skate park, fitness, outdoor fitness, 2 baseball fields, 2 softball fields, soccer fields. Pretty impressive. And it was, like I said, just recently renovated. Next slide. This picture shows some of the construction going on. It does not show it as a final renovated facility, but next picture. Yeah, this shows the brand new, see, you can see the skate park is fairly, I mean, it's just brand new. As is the baseball diamond. Next. The soccer field and next slide. Some really nice amenities. Obviously the fact that they're brand new shows because you could see that they're in top shape. Next. Now, this is an interesting development because many of you are probably not only aware of it, but maybe have been to it. But, I do recall hearing about it some years ago, but it was built in 2007. So it's been in existence for almost 15 years. But it's definitely worth looking at it in its ambition, because it was very ambitious for when it was first created, right? They had this affiliation with Major League Baseball. It was called the Field of Dreams. It includes this huge multi-purpose indoor facility, semi-indoors, that you will see in a minute. And there's quite a difference of opinion as to how much it actually cost. I've heard it costing anywhere between 30 million, and I've heard even the figure being up close to 100 million, only because they went into a great deal of construction, an anticipated cost. And then the city ended up in some sort of litigation with Major League Baseball because the agreement included, and I couldn't fathom this, but the city ended up paying Major League Baseball royalty for the use of the names of the Major League Baseball teams. So 4 fields, each named after one of the Major League Baseball fields. I think the Wrigley Field and Dodgers, and the city was paying, I want to say $100,000 to Major League Baseball for the use of the names. I said, wait a minute, it should be the other way around. It should be Major League Baseball paying the city for baseball. Greg, wouldn't you say that? Creating new fans, new season ticket holders. Don't you think Major League Baseball should be paying the city? Anyway, that was the deal from 15 years ago. They have since modified it and canceled their contract with Major League Baseball. But it tells you how they developed it in the beginning. And it was quite ambitious. You go up there and they have, so next picture, you'll see all those fields. In the center, it's like a pavilion, which is used as a multi-purpose facility for indoor events. In fact, when West Covina held its centennial celebration just about 3 months ago, well, maybe 5 months ago, it was at this pavilion. Next slide, you'll see a picture of it. Yeah, there you say multi-sport pavilion. It's also used as a indoor soccer field, but it can easily be used for big events, including receptions and the like. Quite elaborate, and like I said, it was ambitious for its time, and it would still be ambitious for current times. So I think it will provide a good visual for us, the SOC, to see what a sports complex can include. Next page, next slide, please. This is more recreation stuff. Next. Southgate. This is a lot of indoor development, 64,000 square feet facility, quite large. Now, interestingly, you'll see on here at the very bottom, it includes racquetball courts. We were asking ourselves, do people play racquetball anymore? So see, would you include racquetball in a sports complex current times? Most likely not. I don't know if, I think it's a sport that has kind of gone by the, right? But in years past, a gymnasium, an indoor facility would almost exclusively always include racquetball courts. Here, for us, I'm saying we shouldn't even consider it, but they have it here. Next slide. This is also, let me see, go back one slide, Mark, see what size this. We show the entire site in acreage, but we just show the indoor facility at 64,000 square feet. Okay, next slide. Next slide. They also have a pretty nice indoor swimming pool, but they don't have the retractable roof. And so, but you know, it's quite airy, a lot of daylight. Seems really nice. Full fitness center, which we have on Morgan Park as well. But next slide. And there's the racquetball courts. Next slide. Bell Garden Sports Center, 2006. Here they did have a partnership with Major League Soccer. We don't quite know who paid whom. Hopefully, it was Major League Soccer sponsoring the facility as opposed to them paying them a royalty. But definitely soccer centric in some sense, but you know, also have baseball, softball. Next slide. Two soccer fields. Next. Yeah, there you see the how nice the soccer field looks. Next. Orangewood Park, and darn it, what city is this in? In West Covina. Thank you, Manny. Fairly new, 2017. So definitely some of the best practices of modern times we will be able to see here. But soccer, by and large, soccer has sort of become one of the main sports to have at these facilities. I anticipate us having it as a priority as well, but you know, that's to be determined by the SOC. Next page. All right, next. So it looks like they have artificial turf in the soccer fields. Next. City of Glendale. This is also fairly new, 2015. A lot of tennis courts for sure. And you know, I was partly joking about pickleball, but in many cities they've converted their tennis courts into pickleball courts. Either outright eliminated their tennis courts or downsized their tennis courts. Instead of having 10, they'll end up with 4 tennis courts and then 6 pickleball or 8 pickleball courts. Quite a phenomena happening. Next slide. They seem to have an amphitheater feature here of sorts, which is similar to what we have at Morgan Park. It looks like Manny. Whether they incorporated walking trails in this one or not, the one in Chino Hills, the one that we saw first, the 33 acre site, they have an incredible network of walking trails as well, which would be awesome for us to have as an additional feature. Next. So this is the rendering, which, we had the ability to get some of the renderings from the consultant firm that did this for the city of Glendale. With their permission, we were able to use these renderings and the pictures as well. Next slide. More of a traditional playground incorporated into the sports complex, which would be definitely something that, in a location where the sports complex goes inside of a park, these will be very complementary. Or if we had adequate space to provide a traditional park in addition to the sports complex, then all of these features would be added. Next. This is City of Glendale as well. Correct, Manny Pacific?
Yes. I believe so.
Let's make a discussion that the SOC undertakes a look at how to best support the existing organizations in the city. We know we have 3 Little League organizations in need of the right kind of playing fields. I mean, they have fields now, but they definitely need to be brought up to a higher standard. So, that can play into your discussion whether Little League, the Little League fields are incorporated into the vision. Next slide. The area of the same park. And then we should be down to the last, next slide. Next. Yep, that was it. So that's 11 reference sites. And we know that there are many other parks in the region. I mean, but we felt that those 11 should embody what we believe the SOC would be interested in at least being able to look at. We're not suggesting that we visit all 11 of them. Just talking logistics, if we were to do 2 days, meaning if the SOC were to be so inclined to say, yeah, we want to look at 2 days by which we do site visits, then we will look at the logistics and try to group 3 in that 1 day or half a day. You say, well, let's spend half a day. The way that we would organize it is that we would use one of our buses, one of the shuttle buses, and then as a group head down. And let's just say we go east. We can go to Upland, Chino Hills, and then West Covina, all on the same trip. And that could probably all happen in half a day. Obviously include if it's right through lunch, we would include lunch as part of it. If you tell us, if we can find one single day, we'll try to work out the logistics so that we can do, say, 4 in 1 day. And that can be so definitely please consider how the SOC feels you want to make these site visits. There's 11 choices, but we're not suggesting that we visit each one of them.
I think my favorites to visit would be 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10, which is like the YMCA in Upland. I think the Care Youth Sports in Irwindale, the West Covina Sports Complex in West Covina, the Southgate Sports Center, and Freeman Park in Glendale were my favorites, just because I think it's really important to get an overall view of both ones that have stuff that's covered, stuff that have inside like courts and swimming pools and like brackets and like indoor soccer fields, and also ones that are completely outdoors from what I saw from the photos, just to give us a wide variety. And I just want to keep in mind, I really like the ideas of the walking trail and shaded picnic areas. Because as much as we love going out for picnics, it kind of burns when you sit on a hot day, and it's usually always hot in sunny Baldwin Park. And that's something that I was really looking for. I thought was a great idea.
So does anyone have any other recommendations aside from the ones Sasha mentioned?
I just got a question about senior community. If this is referring also to the senior center and Snyder. Because if it does, I would say Christmas list, a list that the senior center needs. And that's what I'm asking. If this is
To include a senior center in the sports complex?
yes,
Oh, I see.
no, not in sport complex, but the things that it needs, or if it's possible to maybe we can save some money on looking at the Esther Snyder. It's got a few, like you got that swimming pool, you got the basketball. What else does it has? I haven't been there lately. We got ping pong.
So you mean complement what we already have and maybe not repeat it?
Yeah. If we can save some money, but on the other hand, we don't have a baseball field, you know.
Quick. So I know that some of the things that we were discussing when we were talking about the sportsplex out in the community was, obviously we have 3 little leagues within the city.
Yes.
And right now they're having a difficult time trying to get enough kids to play within each league. So one of the things was, let's put all of our efforts together, make it stronger, create one league, one city league, and have them all play under that sports complex. This way, we're not worrying about kids not having uniforms, appropriate, gear, equipment, whatever it is. We're going to be putting all of our efforts into these leagues, right? So that's just the baseball aspect of it. We still have, soccer. Soccer is big also in Baldwin Park. We've got softball, we've got the girls, we've got basketball. So it's something that it would be, I would sit here giving you all my ideas, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to torture anybody. I'm ready to go home. But it would be something like, the way I look at this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for us here in Baldwin Park. Why? Because we don't have the land. So we really need to make this work with the school district to figure out how we're going to be able to attain the property, and then we develop it and then maintain it, right? However, if we're going to do something, let's do it right. Let's make sure we're crossing all of our T's, dotting all of our I's, and not leaving anything out, not just for sports. On the list here, Enrique had an event center. You can make it a multi-purpose facility, right? Where you can create some type of event center there if the space is big enough for it, where we can convert it from, the sports now into an event center where now we can have a concert to accommodate a few thousand residents or whatever it is. Within that, also kind of make it a park where we have the picnic areas, we have those walking trails for the parents to walk, where their kids are either playing or practicing. And then you have the playgrounds for the kids that are not playing within there. They're playing with those playgrounds. So getting some of these ideas from looking at different facilities is great, so that we can get our own idea and then come up with our own design based on our community's needs. But this is also something that I would think would be great to bring to the community once it's a thing that we're going to be able to move forward with. Bring it to the community and say, this is what we're working on within Measure BP. And what do you want to see within this sports complex? These are all our ideas, but what are your ideas? So those are just some of the ideas that I had based behind there, because obviously sports, we want to keep our kids off the streets. We want to keep them busy, entertained, and we don't want to just cater to one sport. We want to go ahead and try to cater to every sport possible and maybe house them all under one facility there.
Yeah.
So then I guess. Because Sasha said 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10. That's 5. Right? 1, 2, 5. Does anyone else want to add any others to that?
I'd just like to say something here. We have 3 leagues, they're surviving by hairs and strings. At this point in time, the kids that go into Ballpark America and the Nationals, et cetera, they live in those areas. I had personal experience when I moved my team from Service High School to Bishop Vermont to at a point that's 2.1 miles. I lost 60% of my kids. So developing the fields that are in those areas, I would feel it would be a bigger help to the leagues. Victor and Eddie, they do a good job in their districts of Ballin Park. They need just that assistance. Their fields, they have 2. They're ran down. They're on school ground property. I seen Vic today cutting the lawn himself with a little 12x12 lawnmower, in that aspect. The fields that have been built, the West Covina Field of Dreams, it is booked 100% of the time for the last 10 years. Softball, men's softball plays there. Co-ed softball plays Monday through Friday. Kids tournaments are played there all weekend long. The care facility that's built in Irwindale, it is a small facility, but it wound up being booked for a whole year by the city of Arcadia, Monrovia, Pasadena, for the whole year for their teams to play there because they didn't have the facilities to play on. So things like that, when we build it, they will come. The facilities that will be there, if there's 6 or 8 fields, they'll be booked. We'll draw in teams from Arcadia, Chino Hills, et cetera. These travel ball teams that play year round and they pay buku bucks to play on good fields. So I see it as just a ball just spinning after we build the facilities, because the revenues will come in from all these kids coming into the facilities and spending dollars at businesses here in Ballin Park and paying the additional measure BP. The other aspect of the event center, currently wrestling, I just had a meeting yesterday with them. We travel all the way to Bakersfield to use their facility to have our state event. They have mentioned to me if there's a facility here that didn't encompass concerts, et cetera, like the Ontario arena there, they would visit a sporting event here as a state level. That's just one aspect. We do a super tournament. We invite 700 kids from all over the nation to come to Azusa Pacific. It's a pretty parking lot, and that's about it. And it's there's no concession stands. There's no place to sit or park or nothing to that effect. And that's our best venue that we have to present in Southern California for kids wrestling right now. Events like concerts and stuff, if the Ontario arena, they just basically said, we don't want anything else besides concerts and major events like monster trucks, et cetera. And they're booked year round. So as we look at this sports complex, I like to see if we look into it as not only a sports complex, an event center. There's other places like just to keep our minds rolling, like La Mirada, they have a splash. They have an aquatic center that's they teach wrestling. They teach swimming there, but they have like a SOC City type of scenario in that area, and they're booked year round because I tried to book it last year and they told me come back in 6 months. and things like that. So all the places here, they're very nice. Chino Hills is one of my favorites. West Covina, I go to the Field of Dreams all the time. The La Puente City Park, the transformation they made with $10 to $15 million, it was a big improvement there. The park was basically ran down. It had racquetball courts at one time, and that's where the skate park's at now. So they made all the improvements, and it is a whole new landscape there. And I hope that we get a property big enough so we can make a big dent and do something great here in Ballin Park. Thank you. Chino Hills is fine. I all the other ones you mentioned are great. I mean, but I like the West Covina Sports Complex. It's a facility, but it does have that indoor soccer arena aspect, and then the concession stands is a great revenue for that park, because men's soccer, or excuse me, men's softball plays there all week long, and after a game, usually people sit in there and have a cold one, a pizza, etc., and watch the football games or baseball games, because it doesn't rain here. And that's what I think. I'm out in the sports world. I see everything on a daily basis. With like Enrique says, schools are not just closing down in Ballin Park. Covina just closed one. Gladstone just closed. They're closing left and right here, and but you can go any given Sunday, any given Saturday, whatever. You go to any of these sports complex, and you'll see these kids walk in with these $500 bats and bags and everything else, and they're from Orange County or San Diego, even coming up here. And so I just wanted to say that all these places that are on this list, they're great places to go visit, because we know we'll see them full. Thank you.
So 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10. That gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. 6. Am I counting correctly? 6. Now, as far as times and dates, I'm assuming you need that information. So I know for myself, it's really, really close to impossible during the week because of my work schedule. So I'll speak for myself, and then I'll ask my colleagues for their feedback. I think for me, it would work best on a weekend. And I don't know what the consensus is from everybody else.
I also work usually like 9 to 5 on weekdays, so weekends are the best. And if speaking for myself, I'm okay with making a full day out of it, because I like field trips.
Anybody else? Because I
agree.
want to take everyone into
weekend's
account.
fine. I practice Monday through Thursday, so I'm taking a day off right now. So weekend's fine with me.
Yeah, weekend's fine with me. I mean, I'm up since 5 every single day. I don't get that.
What about on this side?
Pushing me,
Pastor Jackson.
but I'll go along with the majority.
Okay, Jorge and Maria.
Weekend is fine.
Weekend's fine for me. I just need to know in advance.
Right, of course. Yes.
Whether one day of a weekend, you can tell just one day, or if we can try to find 2 days, then say, try to do 3, one on one weekend and then the other 3, or we can try to squeeze them all in one day. That way you don't have to find another weekend. Maybe.
I mean, I'm okay with one day, but I'm going to say whatever's going to work best to make it happen on the weekend. And then, like Maria said, just to give us enough notice,
Okay.
we make ourselves available.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's enough direction for us.
Okay. Anything else before we move on to the next item? No? Okay. Item 3, Measure BP Sales Tax Financial Update.
Good evening, community members and everyone. at the same time last year, we still having those big dreams, imagining what $6 million can do for this community and Bowen Park. As talking now, I'm still having goosebumps all over me. And I'm very happy and very excited that this dream finally came true. That imagine 6 million every year that can bring great program and wonderful things to this community and the generation to generation. Very, very exciting. And as you may all know, everything program requires funding source and manpower. And I'm very happy to present to you this financial report. I think you can see it from the desktop, right? Or maybe Mark can put it up on the screen also. And as you may see at the very beginning, because all the business still implementing the new rate. So at the beginning, from between January and the beginning of April, we only get $11,000. And then by May and June, by the end of April, May, and June, you see, we got 453,000, and then May 477,000. By June, we almost received the double amount of it. And the reason I say June, and normally we don't receive the tax payment 2 months later. So we received the June payment in August. So in other words, you haven't seen the June payment and July, August payment. And with this revenue received, we projected that we will reach our goal for the current fiscal year 23 and 24 for little bit over $6 million. And I mean $6 million. I assume we will reach more than 6 million. And as you may see, we have not spent a penny with the Measure BP fund. And I want to comment on Pastor Jackson's earlier comments about the bank account. And the city do not have many actual bank account with the bank. How we keep track of the money is that we set up a fund for each purpose or each special revenue that we receive. For example, how we keep track of gas tax, we set up a fund 240 to keep track of the revenue we receive from the state. Then we also use the same fund 240 to keep track of the expenditure that we spend with that fund. So we apply the same method to Measure BP. We set up fund 110 to keep track of all the revenue we receive. And also we are going to keep track with all the expenditure we spend in this fund. And finance will continue to safeguard this money. And every month, when we have the meeting, I will bring you a new update, how much we have received. Once we decide what program we are going to do, what we are going to build, then with the projected expenditure, it will become like all other funds as adopted budget. Then we will spend based on the adopted proposed amount to spend money from this fund. If anyone have question, I'm more than happy to answer in the financial area.
Rose?
Yes,
One question here.
yes.
So does June and July roll into August and September, or is it a net after June taxes are collected, it's posted in the June column. So if we collect $400,000 in June, are we collecting any more money 30 days later from other businesses or businesses that fall apart?
In this financial reporting, what I'm showing here is for the revenue we receive at that time. It's not representing the exact month that the revenue came in.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the exact, whatever comes in August will be posted in August,
Yes,
et cetera, et cetera. It could be for June, July, and August.
yes. And later on, I can set another column to present, for example, September, we receive $800,000. And that represent the actual revenue that came in or collected from the business in June.
Okay.
And this is kind of very new as business continue implement the new rate. So it's not very exact. Once everything all business implemented the new rate, then we can have a better actual number.
So we should see September, October, November be a bigger number than August, or it should start plateauing and start being a number.
Correct only.
Okay.
Presumably, CDTFA follows a specific pattern. So they look at the revenue on a quarterly basis. So the first and the second month of each quarter is somewhat of a like an advance remittance. Then they use the third month of the quarter to reconcile all of the actual revenues that came in for the quarter, but they're always on a 2-month lag. So that's why it's difficult, because we don't have an established pattern for Measure BP yet. I think, Rose, in the matter of a year, it'll take a whole year to see how they actually follow their pattern. But for now, you know, Rose is showing you what came in that month, whether it's for a reconciliation, like they say they would do at the end of the quarter, or whether it's an advance of the quarter. We don't have fully established that yet, but you know, that'll emerge as we actually get their remittances every month.
Yes, thank you, Urige.
Anybody else? No? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
So now we move on to stakeholders, oversight committee, staff requests and communications. Would any of my colleagues like to make any comments? Okay. So with that, we are ready to adjourn this meeting. If there are no comments, we'll go ahead and move to adjourn the meeting. Can I have a second?
Our second.
Second by Pastor Jackson. With that said, we adjourn our meeting at 7:38 p.m. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
All in favor?
Can we still take the picture with the seal in the background?